Well, I had a rough night last night. I think last time I chatted here with you, I was feeling great, and I had 2 fantastic meetings, went really well. We got some plans going for a new project that I'm working on, and that went really well. Did a lot of brainstorming, and that went really well. And had a really good day. Went to the gym and worked out, and had a wonderful day. And so last night, I kind of, what's called going off the wagon. I went off the wagon or whatever. So my husband, once a month, he goes to a political meeting at a Persian restaurant. And he attends many political meetings, but this one is at a Persian restaurant. And I don't typically go to the political meetings. I really don't attend those anymore for various reasons. Not that I'm not, supportive of it, but I just don't want to get that involved on that level. I'm leaving that up to him this time. He's carrying that mantle now. I did back in 2008. Now he's doing it now. So, but anyway, it's at a Persian restaurant, and he came home. He said, "Honey, I brought you something." And I told him, I said, "Don't bring me anything from anywhere while I'm on my cleanse and my at-home retreat. Don't do it. Right? And we don't eat out a lot. We did when my house was under reconstruction because, there was about 2 months there specifically that I couldn't cook at all. It was just my whole kitchen was torn up, right? So we did have to eat out, and I think that also caused me to not do so well in the past few months. So, which is why I'm doing the cleanse. But anyway, so he did. He came home last night, told me about the meeting. It went well, which I was happy about. And then he said, "I brought you something." I said, "Oh, great." So he brought me some flatbread. Okay, so flatbread from the Persian restaurant. I am not a grain person. I mentioned that to you before. We don't do a lot of grains. If we do, I bake all my bread myself, and I either make a sourdough or I'll ferment my flour or do whatever, and so that it's bread that is compatible with digestion and so forth. And I eat only organic and do organic flour or what have you. Anyway, so of course, flatbread from the Persian restaurant, I'm not going to turn that down. So I had some. And they cut, when you go to, I don't know if you've ever been to a Persian restaurant, but they'll serve you flatbread, which is usually cut in triangles. And they'll serve it with mint and some type of a feta cheese or feta-like cheese. And anyway, he didn't bring me all that. He just brought me some flatbread. And maybe that was the problem. I didn't take any fat with it. But, so I had 4 pieces of flatbread. And I thought, that's not going to hurt me any, right? Oh, okay. Yeah. So, let's just say I didn't realize how well I was doing until I did so badly last night. So I had a few pieces. I did have them too late. I had about 7 o'clock, and I think I told you I try to get done eating at 6. But again, what's 4 pieces, little 4 triangles of flatbread? Come on. Anyway, so I had them, and that was the only thing that I did differently all day. So that's the only thing I can nail this on. But so I had a terrible night last night. I tossed and turned all night. I couldn't sleep. I got a headache. I started hot flashing again, getting hot flashes. What else? A headache, couldn't sleep, hot flashes. Oh gosh, and I think that's it. But and I'm sniffly again. So I started out my retreat being sniffly, and I talked to you about it, and I'm still sniffly. But I was becoming less and less sniffly. It was starting to clear up. I wasn't as sneezy and itchy. And then this morning I woke up, my eyes are watery, and I'm extra sniffly. And when you're sniffly, and like I said, I've been sniffly since I started this podcast, you can't talk real well because you're sniffly. So it's hard to breathe. So I apologize. I actually probably sound a lot more nasally and and pausey and all that than typically I speak, because I can't breathe. So there's that. But anyway, I didn't realize, well, I guess I did realize that I was doing better. I was getting less nasally, less stuffed up, and I was able to breathe better until I wasn't. What is that? The whole thing, you don't know what you lost until it's gone. Well, there you go. So something like that, right? Anyway, I was a little frustrated this morning. I was like, oh my gosh, and I'm really super tired because I didn't sleep, and I was a little frustrated with myself. I'm like, wow. I started reflecting about this, because in my Wise and Wildness journal, that's a mouthful, isn't it? But in my journal that I give to my clients who are on doing the nutritional protocol and the Wise and Wild Wellness Way, and which I'm using right now too. In the journal, I have, questions in there, not only just about diet and exercise and poop and all those things, but also about what's happening for you that day mentally and emotionally, spiritually, what's going well, what's not going well. So obviously what's not going well is that I had 4 pieces of bread and all my symptoms came back. And I could be really frustrated with myself. And I can't say that I'm not frustrated, a little. But the next question in my journal is, for the things that aren't going so well, for whatever it is that isn't going so well, how can you turn that into a win? How can you learn from it? And that's the important part. That's the way to turn condemnation into compassion, right? Into understanding, into usefulness, because you could condemn yourself for bad choices that you've made. I mean, you could beat yourself the rest of your life. And certainly, I've had my times where I've beaten myself for things for years. But that doesn't get anybody anywhere. And there's no real usefulness. I mean, it's good to have regret. Sometimes the regret is good because it reminds you of what you don't want to repeat. But you can't live in that regret. Because you live in that regret. I talked about in the beginning of this retreat about being toxic. I felt toxic, right? And toxic being from the poisons that we're breathing in, or the foods that we're eating, or any of the chemicals that we're around that we're breathing in, or drinking, or eating, or what have you. But toxic also can be our thoughts, our emotions. That can leave a toxic burden that can cause illness. So when you are filled with condemnation for yourself or for others, it's not only hurtful to others, but even again, as I mentioned yesterday, even if it's not, even if they're unaware of your, being judgmental, or you're condemning them or criticizing them, you have that in your spirit. And that in your spirit is toxic. That in your spirit is dark, and it's painful. And you can't grow from that, and you can't learn from that. It's better to ask, what happened? As opposed to, what's wrong with you? Why would you do that? But what happened to make you make that choice? What is it? What's your story? What is it that made you think that was a good choice, like eating 4 pieces of bread, when I knew, that I was still working on cleansing, and that really isn't the time for bread. But that's a real easy, deal. That's not a big deal. But when you're talking about really, condemning and judging and being critical of yourself or someone else, usually it's for something much greater than 4 little pieces of bread. Although it can be, when someone is judgmental, and I certainly have been in the past, man, you can find plenty of reasons to judge somebody, even yourself. And certainly yourself, I should say. So the point is that what can you learn from it? What can you learn from a mistake? What can you learn from a bad decision? Right? We don't want to repeat it. But what can we learn from it so that we can use it as a as a path to a new direction. How can we use that to propel us forward? How can we use that with someone else to have compassion for them? And to, when we judge others or ourselves, we put that person in a box. Let's just talk about someone else for a second. When we judge someone, we put them in a box and we kind of separate them from ourselves. And it's dehumanizing because we stop feeling for them on a human level, on a emotional level, on a heart-to-heart level. We start just looking at them as, what's wrong with them? They don't belong. They're not here, right? And as I mentioned yesterday, there's a lot of things to condemn in our world today. I mean, there's a lot of evil in the world. I'm just going to call it like it is. There is evil in this world. There's a spiritual war going on. And that is the truth. You can feel it. But those people who are hurting, who are caught up in the world, who have been deceived, we have to be very careful that we don't condemn them. And we have compassion for them. And I'm going to cry, and I don't want to cry because then I really won't be able to talk. Because they're hurting. They're hurting, and they've been deceived, and they've been lied to. And when we just condemn them, we're not helping them. And, whether you're a Christian, and I am a Christian, or whether you just want to bring a more loving energy into the world, we can't do that through condemnation. Now, I'm going to step back for just a second and say, and. I'm going to put an and with that. We can condemn the evil. We can condemn the evil. Evil is not to be accepted. But let's not, while we're condemning the evil, let's not condemn those who have been deceived by it. Let's try to have compassion. Let's have compassion. Because the truth is, when I look at someone and when I think about their situation and I think about so here's how you change, or how I change, and a tool that I use with my clients. How can we go from condemning and criticizing and putting somebody in a box and separating them from us into becoming compassionate and trying to understand them? Why would we want to? First of all, why would we want to? What do we benefit? Well, as I said, condemnation, critical thinking, criticism of others, all of that weighs heavy on our hearts. And it is a toxic emotion that, even though it may be directed at somebody else, even if it still is toxic to our own soul and spirit. We can't bring out our best if we are toxic. Physically, mentally, or emotionally, spiritually. We have to bring out our best to bring out the best in the world. We can only do that through releasing these negative, critical thinking and thoughts. Now, I think I mentioned I'm not about all this, positive thinking crap, because they're like just putting a Band-Aid, on a gushing wound, right? And it doesn't last. You can only think positive for so long before your brain and you goes, yeah, this is bullshit, right? So I'm not about think positive, because I think that's toxic. Because we can't deny our emotions and our feelings, even the ones that aren't good. And we shouldn't. Those are feelings and emotions that are wanting to be heard, And I shouldn't say shouldn't, but you know what I'm saying. Every part of us, there's nothing bad about any emotion that we have. What makes it bad is our behavior in those emotions. We get caught up in them and what we do with those emotions. I used to tell this to my kids, not only my own kids, but also my kids I taught at my performing arts school. Because we will work a lot about emotions in acting classes or dance classes and bringing in musicality and emotion to the art. And I said, emotion, there's not one emotion that's bad. Not anger, nothing. Not even jealousy is bad. These are all, it's what we do with them. An emotion is just an emotion. It's a natural way of being. We all have them. We all have thoughts. We all have things. It's what we cling to. It's what we dwell on. And it's how we use them. We could use them to be angry, be jealous, and make poor choices, or we can use them to learn more about ourselves. So, going back though to compassion, when we give up the critical selves, our critical selves, and give up the condemning selves, and we move into compassion, then we're no longer divided, and we can reach out and actually help someone, right? So instead of asking what's wrong with you, and you could ask, that's even of yourself. You may ask that of yourself. What's wrong with you? Why'd you do that? Right? What's wrong with you? Instead of asking that question, there's a better question to ask that'll help you to have compassion for someone else and for yourselves. And is, what has happened? What happened? What happened to you? Or what do you believe happened to you? What are the perceptions that the person might have that has put them in this position to make these choices, to be following this path of deception? And when we open up and go, wow, what happened? Then we open up our hearts to that person. And we open up the lines of communication and understanding and compassion. And then we can open up our hearts. When our hearts are open, we can then now help. We can help others heal. And everything I'm saying about what you can do for others also applies to how we can help ourselves heal. I'm sure you've heard this story, and I'm going to go ahead and repeat it here, but you may have already heard it, and maybe you haven't. And the story goes something like this, and there's always a little, variation whenever you hear a story, but this is how I've heard it. There was a man with his boys, his kids, and they were getting on a bus. And the kids were super rowdy and loud, and they got on the bus and they sat down, and the father just seemed to be in a daze. And it was a full bus, right? A lot of passengers. And the father was in a daze. He just seemed to be kind of out of it. And the kids were running up and down the bus aisle, making noise, running into people, and just causing all kinds of disruption. And people were getting frustrated. Well, behind him sat another man. And this other man looked at the father, was completely oblivious to what his kids were doing. And he just couldn't take it anymore. And this man just said, "Hey, what's wrong with you? Mind your kids. They're being disruptive." Well, the father at that point kind of shook himself out of his stupor and looked and called his kids to him. And he turned to the man and he said, "I'm sorry. I apologize. We just got back from the hospital. And their mother, my wife, died." Well, of course, the man felt terrible for jumping down this father's throat. And immediately felt compassion. And reached out and, told him that he was sorry for his loss. But the immediate change from being condemning to compassionate is an understanding. And that man gained an understanding of this father's pain. And so that story, is a reminder to me when I feel critical of myself or someone else. You don't know what's going on in their lives. You don't know. And you may have already been there. You may have been there as well. So instead of saying what's wrong, if you have the opportunity, ask what's happened. If you don't have the opportunity, in your heart, this is what I do, like especially when I'm on the road. And if I start to get critical and I think, you know what, you don't know what's going on with them. You don't know their story. You don't know what's happened. And so I'll say a prayer. I'll say, first, may you be blessed. May you be whole. And hopefully that energy, I believe that energy from my heart will reach their heart. And not only now am I releasing my condemnation of that other person, I'm also releasing that negative energy in my own soul and in my own heart. So, something to think about. Hopefully I kind of went a little bit back and forth in places there. As I said, I'm not writing any of this down. None of this is scripted. So hopefully you're following along. But, I thought about, okay, well, what did I learn from this? Going back to my story of my 4 pieces of bread and how I could be condemning myself. And instead of saying, okay, what's wrong with you? You know better. Well, okay, what happened? Well, what happened is that I got offered 4 pieces of bread and it sounded really good. And I thought, well, it can't hurt. All right, well, that's a choice. So what did I learn from it? Right? That's another thing. What did I learn from it? Well, you know what? I learned that I'm not quite ready to eat bread from a restaurant, which is okay because I don't typically do anyway. But you know what I really learned? I learned how well I was getting. I went back and reflected on all the ways that I was getting better. My joints. I wasn't feeling any pain in my joints. Because I was going up the stairs prior to my cleanse and my knees were starting to hurt and my hips and all that. And I stopped having joint pain. My joint pain just went away. My sniffles were going away. I was sleeping through the night and not tossing and turning and mind reeling. What else? I didn't have any more hot flashes until last night. And I had a lot of energy. I didn't have any headaches. Wow. You know what I learned? I learned that I was really making progress. All right. So now, today, all I'm going to do is get back on track. I know what happened, right? What caused these symptoms to reoccur? I know what happened, right? Looking at it, I give it understanding. I give myself understanding for having a moment of going, ooh, that looks good. We all been there. And now, what do I learn from it? And what can I do about it? So today, I'm going to stay on stage 1 for 1 more day. And just to kind of cleanse out a little bit more before I add any other foods into my diet. And just kind of cleanse out the 4 pieces of bread and all of that. And rest today. I may not even work out. I may just rest, do some detox baths, or a detox bath, just one's probably fine. Although I might do 2. And my enema, and drinking lots of herbal teas and water, lemon water, and just rest. And really celebrate how much better I'm feeling. And that I got to reflect on that because of this circumstance. So bravo for me. All right. Have a great day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.